Madame Zilensky and the King of Finland. To Mr. Brooke, the head of the music department at Ryder College, was due all the credit for getting Madame Zilensky on the faculty. The college considered itself fortunate. Her reputation was impressive, both as a composer and as a pedagogue. Mr. Brooke took on himself the responsibility of finding a house for Madame Zilensky, a comfortable place with a garden, which was convenient to the college and next to the apartment house where he himself lived. No one in Westridge had known Madame Zilensky before she came. Mr. Brooke had seen her pictures in musical journals, and once he had written to her about the authenticity of a certain Buxtehude manuscript. Also, when it was being settled that she was to join the faculty, they had exchanged a few cables and letters on practical affairs. She wrote in a clear, square hand, and the only thing out of the ordinary in these letters was the fact that they contained an occasional reference to objects and persons altogether unknown to Mr. Brooke, such as the yellow cat in Lisbon or poor Heinrich. These lapses Mr. Brooke put down to the confusion of getting herself and her family out of Europe. Mr. Brooke was a somewhat pastoral person. Years of Mozart minuets, of explanations about diminished sevenths and minor triads, had given him a watchful vocational patience. For the most part, he kept to himself. He loathed academic fiddle-faddle and committees. Years before, when the music department had decided to gang together and spend the summer in Salzburg, Mr. Brooke sneaked out of the arrangement at the last moment and took a solitary trip to Peru. He had a few eccentricities himself and was tolerant of the peculiarities of others. Indeed, he rather relished the ridiculous. Often, when confronted with some grave and incongruous situation, he would feel a little inside tickle, which stiffened his long, mild face and sharpened the light in his grey eyes. Mr. Brooke met Madame Zilensky at the Westbridge station a week before the beginning of the fall semester. He recognized her instantly. She was a tall, straight woman with a pale and haggard face. Her eyes were deeply shadowed, and she wore her dark, ragged hair pushed back from her forehead. She had large, delicate hands, which were very grubby. About her person as a whole, there was something noble and abstract that made Mr. Brooke draw back for a moment and stand nervously undoing his cufflinks. In spite of her clothes, a long black skirt and a broken-down old leather jacket, she made an impression of vague elegance. With Madame Zilensky were 3 children, boys between the ages of 10 and 6, all blonde, blank-eyed, and beautiful. There was one other person, an old woman who turned out later to be the Finnish servant. This was the group he found at the station. The only luggage they had with them was 2 immense boxes of manuscripts, the rest of their paraphernalia having been forgotten in the station at Springfield when they changed trains. This is the sort of thing that can happen to anyone. When Mr. Brooke got them all into a taxi, he thought the worst difficulties were over. But Madame Zilensky suddenly tried to scramble over his knees and get out of the door. "My God!" she said. "I left my, how do you say, my tick, tick, tick." "Your watch?" asked Mr. Brooke. "Oh, no!" she said vehemently. "You know, my tick, tick, tick." And she waved her forefinger from side to side, pendulum fashion. "Tick, tick," said Mr. Brooke, putting his hands to his forehead and closing his eyes. "Could you possibly mean a metronome?" Yes, I think I must have lost it there where we changed trains." Mr. Brooke managed to quiet her. He even said, with a kind of dazed gallantry, that he would get her another one the next day. But at the time, he was bound to admit to himself that there was something curious about this panic over a metronome when there was all the rest of the lost luggage to consider. The Zilensky menage moved into the house next door, and on the surface everything was all right. The boys were quiet children. Their names were Sigmund, Boris, and Sammy. They were always together, and they followed each other around Indian file, Sigmund usually the first. Among themselves, they spoke a desperate-sounding family Esperanto made up of Russian, French, Finnish, German, and English. When other people were around, they were strangely silent. It was not any one thing that the Zilenskys did or said that made Mr. Brooke uneasy. There were just little incidents. For example, something about the Zilensky children subconsciously bothered him when they were in a house. And finally, he realized that what troubled him was the fact that the Zilensky boys never walked on a rug. They skirted it single file on the bare floor, and if the room was carpeted, they stood in the doorway and did not go inside. Another thing was this. Weeks passed, and Madame Zilensky seemed to make no effort to get settled or to furnish the house with anything more than a table and some beds. The front door was left open day and night, and soon the house began to take on a queer, bleak look like that of a place abandoned for years. The college had every reason to be satisfied with Madame Zilensky. She taught with a fierce insistence. She could become deeply indignant if some Mary Owens or Bernadine Smith would not clean up her scarlatti trills. She got hold of 4 pianos for her college studio and set 4 dazed students to playing Bach fugue together. The racket that came from her end of the department was extraordinary, but Madame Zilensky did not seem to have a nerve in her. And if pure will and effort can get over a musical idea, then Ryder College could not have done better. At night, Madame Zilensky worked on her 12th symphony. She seemed never to sleep. No matter what time of night Mr. Brooke happened to look out of his sitting room window, the light in her studio was always on. No, it was not because of any professional consideration that Mr. Brooke became so dubious. It was late in October when he felt for the first time that something was unmistakably wrong. He had lunched with Madame Zilensky and had enjoyed himself, as she had given him a very detailed account of an African safari she had made in 1928. Later in the afternoon, she stopped in at his office and stood rather abstractly in the doorway.